Every Google Workspace organization has a unique data fingerprint. You can't protect sensitive data if you don't know what it is. Let's use the Google Admin Console to create a unique data detector for your organization. What exactly is sensitive data? It's not as easy as you might think. If you ask 3 people, you'll probably get 3 different answers. Student IDs, IEP information, a detention notice, lunch balances and lunch accounts, bus routes. Before you can protect your most sensitive data, you need to take an inventory and understand what data is sensitive for your unique organization. Now, I recommend a 3-tier system: stoplights, red, yellow, green. Now, your red data, that's your most sensitive data. That's going to be things like credit card numbers, health information, social security numbers, IEP information if you're a K-12 school. Now, yellow data could be sensitive. Typically, the more concentrated it is, the more sensitive it becomes. Things like email addresses, phone numbers, addresses. By themselves, a single data entry, probably not a big deal, but 100 or 1,000 of those, that's probably not ideal either. So we want to make sure we understand that. Then you've got green data. That's information that's publicly available. For schools, that might be things like your bell schedule, syllabus, teacher contact information if it's published on your website. Data like this should have no problem being shared both internally and externally. Once you have a good idea of what data is most important to you, we can begin setting up data loss protection rules to prevent that data from leaking internally. I created a data worksheet inventory that you're welcome to use to start cataloging the data that you want to protect. We're going to be creating some custom rules in just a minute, and before we can do that, we need to understand the syntax, the format of that data so that we can write rules that work effectively. You can download a copy of this worksheet. There's a link in the video description. We need to know things like how are your student IDs organized, what's the difference between a staff and a student email address, where are your IEP records stored and what do they look like, what does a discipline record look like in your district. So this will help you collect all that information and then identify, which items are high, moderate, or low risk, and then we'll create rules associated with each of these. Let's go ahead and create our first rule. This one will be pretty easy. I'm logged into the Google Admin Console. You probably will need to be a super admin in order to accomplish this next step. We're going to head down to the rules section towards the bottom of the admin console, and we're going to click on create rule, and we're going to select data protection. We're going to create a rule for protecting social security numbers. So we'll give it a name. You can give it a description if you want and decide which groups or organizational units this rule will apply to. I'm going to do the entire organization. You can also select which Google service will be protected by this rule. I typically select both Google Drive and Gmail. And then we'll add our condition. Now, this one is going to be very easy because it's pre-configured by Google. So we're going to select the all content, and we're going to scan for a predefined data type. And then we're going to select that data type. And this is a long list. It's based by country. We're going to scroll down till we get to the United States. And eventually, we will find social security numbers. Now, we can select our probability. Some numbers might be in a similar format as a social security number. So we're going to say we want medium likelihood. And you can adjust this to say, well, if you have one social security number, that's probably legitimate, sending back and forth between 2 staff members. But if we're going to do more than that, then we're going to trigger the rule. So you can set that as you wish. Then we'll continue and select the action that will be triggered when that rule is matched. So we might say internal only. So we can't send an email externally. And then we can also do the same thing for Google Drive, block external sharing. You can go ahead and customize this, internal, external, give a message if you wish. And then we can also turn on alerts. Now, I do recommend this. That way you can actually see how many times this alert is triggered. For social security numbers, that would be a pretty high alert. If you wish, you can also decide to send an email directly to an administrator. And you can either send it to super admins or select a specific person. Be careful with this. You will get a lot of potential notifications. Typically, I will send them to myself, but then I'll create a rule in Gmail to make sure that those go into a folder so they're not, filling up my inbox. We'll click continue, and this is where you'll be able to preview your rule and then decide if you want that rule to be active or inactive. Once we select that, it'll show up in our rules menu. We'll be able to monitor it and see how many times Social Security numbers are making their way through our organization. Now, Google has quite a few pre-configured rules for common things like driver's license, social security numbers, passports, things like that. But that doesn't help us with the unique data within our schools and organizations. And that's why we want to create a custom data detector. Now, to do that, we're going to navigate to a different area of the Google Admin Console. We're going to head over to the Security section, scroll down to Access and Data Control, and then look for Data Protection. This is where we're going to find Manage Data Detectors, where we can define our own special rule to look for unique data within our organization. I'm going to walk you through the first one and let you create a few on your own. We'll go ahead and create a new detector by clicking on Add Data Detector. You have two options, regular expression or word list. I'm going to do regular expression. We're going to start by creating a custom data detector for student IDs. We'll give this a name, student ID detector, matches rules for finding student IDs. Now we need to put a regular expression in here that will create logic that identifies student IDs but ignores other similarly formatted numbers. This can be a challenge. You have to have a lot of experience writing regular expressions in order to do this effectively. I do not possess that experience. Fortunately, this is an area where AI can be tremendously helpful. Now, you're going to need that data inventory that we worked on earlier. I'm going to open up Google Gemini. You could do this in ChatGPT as well. And I've already created a prompt that's asking Gemini to examine the sample student IDs that I've entered. Don't worry, these are all fake. And recommend a regular expression formula that can be used in the Google Admin Console. I will put a link to this prompt in the video description if you want to use this as I've created it. We'll hit search, and Gemini is very good at writing these regular expressions. Now, if you're not familiar with regular expressions, I do recommend the last little statement that I added to my prompt, which is please describe this rule in language that's easy to understand. So that way I can actually learn how this rule is created to make sure that I'm comfortable with it, and then we'll test it out and put that into the admin console. All right, Gemini has finished its process and it's come up with a regular expression. That's what it looks like right there. And then it's given me the explanation of what each item says. And I can go ahead and do any modifications that I feel are necessary. Let's go ahead and copy that regex formula, head back to the admin console and paste it in. Now we can test the expression by grabbing some sample student data. Just grab a random ID here, drop that into, and say, yes, that would be a match. Now, if there's a space, it's not going to match. If this was an older ID, like if it was 1999, that's not going to match. So if you have old IDs, like I might want to go back and say, hey, I need this to work historically for IDs pre-2000. But this does look like it's an effective fit for my purposes here. So I'll go ahead and create that rule. And you can create as many rules as you need to. Another thing you might want to do is analyze your IEP documents. It's probably going to be a little difficult to create a regular expression rule for IEP data. So for that one, you might need to create a word list. So a document that contains these words will be part of the DLP rule. Again, that's where we can use Gemini to upload a sample IEP and ask it to identify keywords or a strategy for identifying an IEP document without catching, other random documents that might include similar language. Gemini is a tremendous resource as you're creating these data loss protection rules. Once you have your custom data detectors in place, you can head back to the rules section of the admin console and create a new data protection rule that is built on top of those custom rules. So again, I'm going to do student ID. We'll apply this to everybody and hit continue. Again, we'll work with Google Drive and Gmail. But this time, we are going to scan for a regular expression. Now, this part is a little funky. We're going to click on regular expression, and then we're going to click on it again, and that's where you should begin to see the custom data detectors that you've created. So select that. Now, this is where you have to be a little careful. A single instance of a student ID is probably not a massive concern. But what if I have 100 student IDs? That is a bigger concern. I don't want a big database of student information floating around. So you might want to create multiple rules based on 1, maybe it just warns, 10 it warns, then 100 or 1,000 it prevents external sharing or copying or downloading or whatever you prefer. You can start to stack these on top of each other. We can add multiple conditions. So if it has a student ID and a student email address or block, or it contains some of the keywords from an IEP, it can block that. So you can get very creative with your rules. Hopefully, the combination of these custom data detectors and these rules will help you identify and protect the sensitive data in your organization. If you enjoy tips like this, I invite you to sign up for the Google Admin Weekly, my free weekly newsletter for IT admins who manage Google Workspace for education.